Today we're going to continue this Seachange series and we're going to talk about miracles. Last week, Lorinda gave a wonderful sermon on how to be called or how we are called. Today we're going to talk about miracles and the impact of miracles on our life. And next week, Moy is going to speak to us about faith and the importance of faith in our life. So that's the navigation of the series. Miracles are an interesting topic. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But first, I will show you a few pictures from around the Sea of Galilee. Now, my guess is a number of you have been to the Sea of Galilee. You've experienced it. For those of you who haven't, here are a few pictures just to give you a sense of what Israel and the Sea of Galilee is like. The most incredible thing about Israel, the Promised Land, is that the geography today, of course, is the same as it was when Jesus walked on the planet. So the beauty of being able to go to the Middle East is to be able to go and sit at some of these places and really get a feel for what actually happened at these places. And so much stuff happened around the Sea of Galilee. And the other interesting thing about the Middle East is because there's so much desert around the place, the dust tends to get kicked up into the air, and so unlike in Australia, you can actually watch the sunset for about an hour or an hour and a half. You can look straight into the sun, and it looks absolutely majestic and surreal. And there's nothing better, I think, than sunset or sunrise around the Sea of Galilee. So this picture is just, I think, as the sun is starting to set. It's taken from somewhere near Tiberias. It's looking across the ocean. I think this area over here is around the area where Jesus performed one of his miracles, where he commanded the demons to come out of a person and the swine went into the water. It happened somewhere around here. And I guess you can kind of imagine the scene as the sun sets around Galilee. You can kind of imagine Jesus walking along the path and calling the disciples. The place is just very, very surreal when you go there. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. You can kind of imagine the disciples fishing in the sea. The sea looks very calm here, but of course, as you know, it can get very, very wild and woolly. But you can just kind of relax and take it in. And if you ever get the chance to go, I highly recommend that you spend some time just sitting around and just taking in the atmosphere, because it really is quite amazing and you can really imagine what is going on. Sunsets are just beautiful on the Sea of Galilee. So that just gives you a taste and a flavour. Lorinda took us on a great wild excursion last week. Do you remember her sailing along and all the rest of it? It's very, very interesting. Here is just a few pictures of some of the sunsets. Now, this is just looking over to Tiberias. It's the biggest city around the Sea of Galilee. Now it's a huge city. In the time of Jesus, it would have been a very, very small city. So today we're going to look at the activity of Jesus and what he did around the Sea of Galilee, and we're going to explore this topic of miracles. Now, miracles, very, very interesting topic. So we're going to ask the question, can miracles happen today? Can miracles happen in your life? Can miracles happen in my life? How real are miracles? It was the first day of an interesting journey that I had. I happened to be required to do 40 hours or more of what they call colporteuring. So for those of you who don't know what that is, another word is literature evangelism. Did you have to do this, Moy? It's a fun thing to do. 40 hours of knocking on doors. That was perfect timing. Knocking on doors and inviting people to purchase books that are of a religious nature. And at 19 years of age, or 20, whatever I was, this prospect absolutely thrilled me. It's a bit like the Mormons knocking on the door. You know, come on, you can see them coming. Should I answer or not answer, you know? So here I am, first day. I had to go, and I happened to live in Melbourne at the time. I went to the Nunawading campground, as you do. I went to the Literature Evangelists Hall, as you do, to get my first day of induction and training Is that building still up? Have they demolished it? I'm not sure. It's gone. And I had 1 hour of introduction to literature evangelism, how to knock on doors and all the rest of it. Of course, I wasn't going to do anything that day. I was just going to observe. The literature evangelist who was with me, he was the guy that was going to knock on the doors and do all the stuff. I was just going to follow along for the ride. And I just have to say, as a quick sideline, if there are any LEs here or people who have been LEs, these guys are the salt of the earth. I mean, they knock on doors every day. If you ever want to fill your church with Bible studies and new people, just get these guys knocking on doors. It is amazing what they can dig up. Anyway, first day on the job, for me, we start knocking on doors, and I'm expecting at least 3 or 4 people to just jump at us and say, yeah, I need these books, right? Well, knock on the door. First door, no answer. Knock on the second door, no answer. Knock on the third door, no answer. What do people do during the day? I don't know. The next door, knock. Someone answered. We started, no thanks, bang. Went to the next door, started to speak, no thanks, bang. And it was like this for the whole morning. No, 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 no. All right, so that was the morning. It's one day, it happens. The afternoon, same thing happened. No, 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 no. I think the guy that was with me was a little bit embarrassed because he was a very good LE and he sold a lot of books. Not this day. We got to the final house and he kind of looked at me and said, should we really do this? And I said, no. Let's just go home. He said, yes, okay, come on, let's do it. So, all right, we went to it, knocked on the door. This guy, after 5 minutes, because we weren't going to leave until we sold something that day, this guy came out after 5 minutes and opened the door. Now, immediately, I could tell that there was something different about this guy. His eyes were the size of golf balls. He stared at us, and when he stared at us, it was like he was looking through us. And so my LE guy was very happy because this was somebody who was actually listening to us during the day. So he started his spiel, and he just talked about general stuff here and there, you know, about the books and their Bible story books and, you know, all these sorts of things. And he just said nothing. He just stood there. Okay, fine. And after the LE guy was out of wind because he just kept on talking, the guy looked at him and he said, come in, come in. Well, this was an invitation too good to be true. So we started to come in. We walked a couple of feet in the door. And then things started to get a little bit dicey. He said he'd sort of twisted and turned. He was in his sort of corridor. He sort of twisted to us and he says, you're not selling books. You're not selling books. These are not books. And then he turned and he opened up his bedroom. He said, these are books. So we turned our head around the corner, looked into the room, and it was a room empty. And it had magazines all over the floor, really weird. The magazines were piled up about 3 or 4 feet high on the wall, all pornographic. Very strange. Immediately, my head started thinking, what is going on? I don't know how it happened. Somehow, he got us, and we were walking up his sort of corridor towards his kitchen. We found ourselves in his kitchen. He still kept on talking to us. The LA guy sort of had a book in his hand, and as he was talking, I could see that this guy was getting more and more and more agitated. His eyes got wider and wider, if that was possible. He started to look a bit aggressive and a bit violent. And all of a sudden, just out of the blue, he grabbed this book from this LE's hand, and he said something that put shivers up and down my spine. We'd been talking about books. We'd not mentioned anything at all about the world ending or Jesus coming. We mentioned nothing about Adventists. We mentioned nothing about the end times. It was just all Bible stories. Here they are. He grabbed this book out of the hands, just abruptly out of the hands of the LE. And this book just happened to be The Great Controversy, but it wasn't titled the great controversy. The day before or the week before, Science Publishing Company had come up with this great idea. We're not going to call it the great controversy, we're going to call it cosmic conflict. Now, I had no idea what cosmic conflict was. The LE had no idea what cosmic conflict was. He grabbed this book, he looked us straight in the eye, he was starting to get angry, and he said, "So you think the world's going to end soon, do you?" And it was confronting, because there is no possible chance that he knew anything about the great controversy or what book it was or anything. And immediately I knew that this situation was not quite like most situations. He held that book in his hand, and I can tell you this guy started getting furious and angry. You could see the steam coming off his body. He started to move, and he was starting to get physically violent. He started to lunge towards us. He was throwing his arms around the place. He hated this book. And I started to pray, because what do? You're standing in some guy's kitchen. You don't know what's going on. You're with somebody else. This crazy stuff's going on. And I started to pray, "Please, Lord, please, please, please." And I saw a dramatic change in this guy. He went from absolutely aggressive and violent, and he was going to do us some serious, serious harm. And I could see just like that, he became restrained. Just immediately, he was restrained. And I could see him fighting like this. I could see him trying to move his body to try and go for us. But he was restrained. And of course, we took that opportunity to move around him, because there was no other way out, to move around him, to go out the corridor, down the corridor, and out we were safe. You can't tell me, having gone through that experience, having thought about it for so long, that guy was anything other than possessed by another spirit. And you can't tell me that what happened there was nothing other than God restraining him to protect us. For the first time, I'd actually seen something happen in the supernatural world that really startled me. It does happen. Miracles do happen. Do miracles happen today? Absolutely. Can God do a miracle in your life today? Absolutely. And my guess is, if I asked many people here, if we just said, "Come up if you've had a miracle in your life," I bet this stage would be full. There will be so many stories, you couldn't count them. When we look back at the miracles of Jesus, there were so many miracles around the Sea of Galilee. So much stuff happened at the Sea of Galilee. Jesus walked on water. He calmed the storm. There was a massive catch of fish. He exorcised a demon or demons out of a person into swine, and they ran into the water here. So much stuff happened. Now today we're going to focus on this one, the feeding of the 5,000 and the feeding of the 4,000. Two stories, same kind of event, similar message, and a very, very interesting message for us today about Seachange. But before we do that, I just wanted you to notice a couple of things. One thing that I found interesting when I was at the Sea of Galilee, we went on a tour, and there's just all of these places to go and see. This place called Capernaum, where Jesus lived. I always wondered, why did Jesus choose Capernaum to go and live? He was from Nazareth. He decided to come over here. And it was very interesting. The tour guide, when we were there, said to us, at the time of Jesus, there was kind of like a border, like New South Wales and Victoria, between Capernaum on one side and apparently Jesus, the theory was Jesus moved there just because, or simply because, he wanted to avoid the authorities who might come and get him from one district. He could move into another district. Anyway, Jesus was very strategic. There was a lot of miracles, and you could ask yourself, why miracles? Why did Jesus perform miracles? And why do miracles happen? What was the purpose of miracles? I believe that Jesus came and performed miracles for one primary reason. I think there are many different reasons, but one primary reason. And that reason is to display and to show the kingdom of God to a people who had no idea what the kingdom of God was about. He came and he decided that he would sharply contrast the world that he lived in, the world that he knew, the world of God, and compare that against the world that the Israelites were in at the time. The world that Jesus came from, the spiritual world that Jesus came from, was like this. It had totally different rules. Everything was different in the spiritual world of the kingdom. There is, and you can have, and he decided to share this with everyone. You can have a different life in this kingdom. There's a totally different mentality in this kingdom of God. And he compared that against the world that the Israelites were in. Anything is possible. Anything is possible in this world of the kingdom. It's a world where God actively intervenes, actively guides, actively directs, and most important, it is a world in which there is absolute peace, absolute harmony, and total freedom. If you compare that against the physical world that the Israelites were in and the Jews were in, totally different world. What were the Jews like when Jesus came? The Jews were totally bereft of any real spiritual life. It was totally gone. For centuries, they had worshipped other gods. They had gone into apostasy, then reformed, then into apostasy, then reformed. They were at a point, and for maybe 200 or 300 or 400 years, I think, there were no prophets. Israel had just slidden backwards and backwards and down and down and down and down and down. This was the world that Jesus performed his miracles in. So he contrasted this amazing world that he was the ruler of with the world of the physical world that the Jews had lived in. There's one miracle, and it is the miracle of the loaves and fishes that I think really captures this idea of sea change and really captures this idea of the kingdom. And I want you to read it with me. It's in Mark 6, verses 34 to 44. Let's read it through. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. By this time, it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. This is a remote place, they said, and it's already very late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered, and I want you to notice this next statement or question. You give them something to eat. Right? We'll come back to that. They said to him, that would take more than half a year's wages. Are we going to spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? How many loaves do you have? He asked. Go and see. When they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 baskets of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of men, and I'm guessing women as well, or maybe there were additional women, who knows, were 5,000. A lot of people. Okay? I find this an amazing statement. Of all the sentences in this passage, this is the one that stood out for me. Here are the people. Jesus is talking to them. They are longing to hear him. He doesn't want to stop. It's late in the day. He saw the need that they had. And what did he say? The disciples come to him. We need to stop this. What's his first response? You give them something to eat. I mean, what were the disciples supposed to do, really? What were they to do? I mean, here they were, very limited resources, not much capacity, and Jesus asks the impossible of them. It's a little bit like, perhaps, us saying, well, there's a potluck lunch today, you're all invited, of course, but there's another 300 people coming in about 20 minutes, and ladies, why don't you just whip up something, a nice 3-course meal within 20 minutes. They'll be here for 10 or 15 minutes, then they've got to go. I mean, how possible would that be? I should say ladies and men. I'm sure there are amazing male chefs out in our kitchen. Am I right? We'll find out today. It's a bit like me saying to my son, Lachlan, where are you, Lachlan? I'll find you. Yes, okay. He's here and he's inside. This is good. Lachlan, I know that you are a student, and I know that you've got to drive yourself to uni. We've got 2 cars, one for me, one for my wife, and I know that you're not earning any money. Lachlan, can you please just go out and buy yourself another car? Right? What would he say to me? What would Lachlan say to me, right? He would say, you are stupid, you are crazy, what are you smoking? Are you on drugs? I mean, he would just say, you are mad, right? But yet Jesus actually asked the disciples to do it. And he was serious. You do it. You do it. How would you have reacted? When you look at these passages, the thing that struck me in them is that the role of the disciples and our role is actually very similar. What is the role of the disciples? The disciples were to go and preach and teach the gospel of the kingdom to the world. What's our role? Our role is to go and preach the gospel of the kingdom to our world. And I quote from Lorinda from last week. We are called to be fishers of men, not just keepers of the aquarium. I thought it was a great quote. Yet, I think Jesus does miracles, and he does them in our lives every day, but it's not always huge, big, massive miracles. I think very often they are small miracles that happen on a day-to-day basis. And what I also find interesting, just coming back to the disciples, Jesus could very easily have just clicked his fingers and the meal appeared before everybody. No, he had the disciples go out. What was he doing? He was trying to teach the disciples. It's almost like he was saying to the disciples, you've been with me for a while. You've seen all of these miracles. You know about this gospel of the kingdom. Now, what are you going to do when the first real test comes along? Amazing. But anyway, I think Jesus does, when we think about miracles in our own lives, I think that miracles happen on a small basis. Although I'm not saying they can't happen on a big basis. I'm not saying that big miracles don't happen. I think they do. But I have to admit that I'm somewhat skeptical of the miracles that you see on television with televangelists and all this kind of thing. I think miracles get a bad name. But I do think miracles happen to us on a regular basis in a small way if we have the sight to see them. There's an interesting story that was in the Adventist Review not too long ago. I think it was about a month ago. It's about this gentleman called Roberti. I guess it's a bit like being called Anthony, right? Or John. Anyway, Roberti. Very interesting chap. He's a police officer in Brazil. His job, I think, was to guard or to protect the head of his local region. And he had a very interesting experience. His brother-in-law decided that he wanted to give him some videos to watch, evangelistic videos that would lead him to a further relationship or bring him into the church, what have you. So the videos were given to him, or DVDs, and when he put the DVD into the DVD set, the DVD player just decided to stop. It just went crash. Okay, fine, tried it again. So finally it worked. When it worked, he just all of a sudden felt very, very drowsy and asleep. He just couldn't keep his eyes awake. So clearly something was going on. A few weeks later, apparently, the gentleman who'd given him the videos started calling to follow up. He and his wife were in a meeting, and the phone rang. It was this gentleman who'd given them the videos, her brother. He was with his wife. And Roberto looked to his wife and said, answer the phone. She didn't. She looked terrified and she just let it ring out for some reason. And he said, why didn't you answer the phone? She said, the phone is ringing, but there's no SIM card in my phone. So how can it be ringing? A couple of weeks later, when the SIM card was in the phone, they were heading back from a concert. I think it was early morning, 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning. Her phone started ringing again. This time they tried to get it but missed it, saw that there was a missed call from her brother, called him back, and when she called him back, he said, "I never called you. Nothing happened. Why are you calling me at 1:30 in the morning?" And I guess when they put all of the pieces together, what they realized was that these were sort of prompts to go back and look at the videos, and stuff started to happen that was just different and out of the realm of possibility. And I have to admit, I've had a couple of experiences like this myself. And I guess these are just the small things that happen to you that make you think, about the kingdom and miracles and these sorts of things. I spend most of my time, as some of you know, working as a consultant. My job is to transform businesses and people and operations, and it's a very demanding job. I had one particular client of mine who, very sort of large group, and normally I prepare very well for these things, and I did prepare very well for this particular event. I had to fly. I was actually flying to Perth. I flew to Perth, and as I said, I'm kind of the traveller that puts everything in its place, and I tick every box, make sure everything before it's done. Test. They did tell me that there was a microphone up here somewhere, right? Okay. On my back. Test. Am I back? No. Batteries. Always the batteries. We did prepare. We have extra batteries, but to get them out, a bit too long. Anyway, where was I? Preparation. Contingency plans. I am normally very well prepared for these kinds of things, so I got into my hotel, I changed the time on my clock or on my BlackBerry, went to bed. In the morning, my alarm went off. I got up, and I guess the reason why I talk about time a lot is for this particular client, I taught them a lot about time management. Big mistake. Because every minute of my time they allocated, and they were trying to make me work 6 in the morning till 6 at night. Anyway, long story. Time was important to them. Anyway, I got up, I looked at my BlackBerry, I turned the alarm off my BlackBerry, but I noticed something very interesting. My alarm was actually not set for the time that it went off. It was set for 2 hours later, and I figured out later what had happened was that I had got into Perth the night before. Probably it automatically changed time, as it does. I then set it again, and of course the time was incorrect. When I woke up that morning and I looked at my BlackBerry, the alarm went off. Now, I don't know how to explain that, other than it just happened. Another interesting thing happened to me. This is maybe a little bit more physical. On this occasion, I was in Shanghai. I had a very long week. It was treacherous almost, very tough. And I got to the end of the week and I was absolutely exhausted. I had a flight tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. And as you do, when you're exhausted, you sort of say, will I pack now? Or will I just lie down for a few minutes, have a sleep, and get up in half an hour and pack my bags? Well, of course, I lay down, and 6 hours later, I lay down, I completely fell asleep. And I was so exhausted and I was so asleep that I think I would have slept right through the night. There's no way known I would have made a 5 o'clock flight in the morning. At about 11 or 11:30, if you can believe this, I literally felt a tap on my shoulder. I jumped up, and of course it woke me up. What's going on? I packed my bag, of course made my flight in the morning. Now, I don't know how to explain that, but for me, that was as physical as me shaking your hand. It happened. This is the kind of little stuff that I think that happens to us in terms of miracles. But despite all of these things happening, this world of the kingdom that
God wants us to live in, we kind of look at that and step back from it. There's another great passage, in fact, a similar passage, a similar story found in John 6:25 to 35. It's pretty much the same event, but a few different things. When they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Jesus answered, "Very truly I say to you, you are looking for me, not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you. For on him God the Father has placed his seal of approval." Then they asked him, "What must we do? What must we do to do the works God requires?" Jesus answered, "The work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent." So they asked him, "What sign will you give to us that we may see it and believe you? What will you do? Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness. As it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but is the Father who gives you true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." "Sir," they said, "always give us this bread." Then Jesus declared, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." Jesus said, "I am the bread of life." Bread in the Middle East is a very intoxicating thing. It is a beautiful thing. They make bread in the Middle East like no other people that I know, except the French. I've got a couple of loaves of bread here. I've got one tip-top 9-grain pumpkin seed. I'm sure it's very good. Not quite like they do in the Middle East, but nonetheless very, very good. Jesus used bread as a metaphor. What was he saying? He was saying, give up the bread. Forget about your physical and emotional needs in the physical world, but rather look to the spiritual world. Look to me for all of your needs. In other words, what he was saying was, let go of all of your emotional and physical stuff and let me handle it. But you know what? When it comes to Seachange and change, we don't like that very much. We're not easily changed. And we don't want to let go of the stuff that we like, particularly if things are going well. It's sort of like, we take this bread and we say, yes, I can do it. Yes, I can do it. I know this is difficult. I know it's hard, but I can do it. I can do it. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Look what I've done. Wow, this is me. Or maybe we hold the bread close to us. We know things are challenging. I know it's tough. I know it's tough. How do I do this? How do I do this? Things are going bad. Things are not going well. Why? God asks us to let go of all of the stuff and to give it to Him. How do we do this? There's a couple of ways. First, we have to actually believe. And when I say actually believe, I mean really believe. One interesting experience that I had, or one of the most interesting experiences that I have had, is going to speak or share the gospel overseas to small communities of people in villages. This one happened to be in India, and I can tell you, when they come to you with all of their needs, and there are many, and they look in your eyes, and they say, will you pray for me? And can you ask God for a miracle? And it's not like they're asking, just expecting nothing to happen. No, they ask with everything to happen. And this is very confronting. The same in Africa. They come, they look at you. A lot of people struggle because there's a lot of AIDS. A lot of young women come. They say, I have AIDS. My children have AIDS. Please, we need a miracle. Please, can you ask God to get rid of this AIDS? Moy next week is going to talk about faith. Faith, I think we could talk about forever. It's just one of those things which is very, very difficult for us to do. What's the second thing we need to do? We need to actively seek God's will. When I think of all the biblical characters, it's probably Moses, of all people, that actively sought God's will. He did amazing things, absolutely amazing things. But what does the Bible say that he did? He said he always sought the will of God. Please show me your ways. Enoch walked straight into heaven. Elijah went up in a fiery furnace into heaven or flames. This kind of actively seeking God's will is amazing. And there's one story which I want to finish on, which is this story of George Muller. You may or may not have heard of George Muller, but he was a guy that was a bit of a rebel as a youngster, grew up opposing God. Finally, he was converted. He wanted to open up orphanages in the area of Bristol. And he did. He started with 50 cents in his pocket. And apparently, as the story goes, he didn't ask anybody for any money and ended up with about $7,000 to do it. His story is amazing. He used to walk around or run around preaching and teaching. He went overseas a number of times. And there's one story which I want to share with you about his faith in God. And it's this. He was going from, I think, England to Canada. He was going to a place called Quebec. He had an appointment on Saturday, and a huge fog came over the pathway of the ship. And as it's documented, this is the story. He went to the captain of the ship and he said, "Captain, I have come to tell you that I must be in Quebec on Saturday afternoon." This was Wednesday. "It is impossible," I said. "Very well, if your ship can't take me, God will find some other means of locomotion to take me. I have never broken an engagement in 57 years. I would willingly help you, but how can I? I am helpless. Let us go down to the chart room and pray," he said. I looked at the man of God. This is through the eyes of the sea captain. I looked at the man of God, and I thought to myself, what lunatic asylum could this man have come from? I never heard such a thing. "Mr. Muller," I said, "do you know how dense this fog is?" "No," he replied. "My eye is not on the density of the fog, but on the living God who controls every circumstance of my life." He got down on his knees and he prayed one of the most simple prayers. I muttered to myself that would suit a children's class where the children were not more than 8 or 9 years old. The burden of his prayer was something like this: "O Lord, if it is consistent with thy will, please remove this fog in 5 minutes. You know the engagement you have made for me in Quebec on Saturday. I believe it is your will." When he finished, I was going to pray. This is the sea captain. But he put his hand on my shoulder and told me not to pray. "First, you do not believe he will. And second, I believe he has. And there is no need whatsoever for you to pray about it." I looked at him, and George Muller said, "Captain, I have known my Lord for 47 years, and there has never been a single day that I have failed to gain an audience with the king. Get up, Captain, and open the door, and you will find that the fog is gone." I got up, and the fog was gone. It's an amazing story, and it just epitomizes the life that this one man lived in communion with God in the kingdom. Change is difficult. Change is never easy. Change on a corporate level is extremely difficult. Change on a personal level is very emotional. This is an interesting slide about the driving side change. So they switch from left to right or right to left in Sweden, and you can see the result. It's never easy, either personally or in a group. But God today is calling us to make a change. God is calling us to make a sea change. He's asking us to give up all of the stuff that we are used to. He's asking us to ignore almost this physical world that we are living in and to accept the kingdom of God where miracles happen every day. He's asking us to live fully in the kingdom, to fully believe in him and to fully follow his will. Maybe, just maybe it's time for us to step forward individually and as a group. And if we do, I believe that we will see miracles both in our own lives and in the lives of our church.